How many of you are enjoying your Sabbath today? Malachi, you're not enjoying your Sabbath? You're not having a good time? Oh, that's so sad, but I'm sure at the end of the story you're going to have a good time. Okay, the story I'm going to tell you is about a little girl. And the little girl's name was Annie. Malachi, do you know of a little girl named Annie? You don't? Okay, Annie was a very little girl, and they lived on this big farm out in the west. This happened long time ago, before there were cars, before there were telephones, and they lived in a small mud house. And father said, this house is too small. I'm going to build a big house with wood. So they cut down trees and they built this big, beautiful house together. And they moved into this big house. And Annie said, Daddy, can I use this little house as a playhouse? He said, sure. Now, Annie didn't have any brothers and sisters. So she had her dolls over there. She had a little table there. And she would play tea party with her dolls and her teddy bears. And she was having fun. And mother would come once in a while to the house, and she would play tea party with her mom. And they had a very wonderful time together. Now, one day, while Annie was in the house and she was rearranging the house, she had a little knock on the door. And she said, I wonder who is at the door. So she went and opened the door, and there was her mom. Her mom came. You can see her. Her mom said, I just thought I would come and visit you. I baked some apple pies. So she brought an apple pie, and she said, I have to go home now, and I have to finish up some work. So Annie took the apple pie, and she put it on the table, and she looked for all of her little dolls and her teddy bears, and she was arranging them around the table to have a little party with them. And suddenly she saw a shadow from the window. And she said, this is strange, because Mom just went home. I wonder who is here. And they lived on this big farm. To go visit someone, they had to really walk a long distance. And then she heard this big bang. Bang, 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 bang on the door. She got scared. And this person wouldn't stop banging the door. And then she said, okay, let me go open the door. It didn't sound like Mommy and Daddy had gone to town, which was 2 or 3 days away from where they lived. And so in her fright, she picked up the pie and she opened the door. And there was this big red Indian. And he had his face painted. Can you see the red Indian? He had his face painted. And he had a tomahawk in his hand. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide under the sofa. She couldn't do any of those things. And she said, and he started talking in his language to her. And she couldn't understand what he was saying. And her eyes were as big as saucers. And can you see how frightful this man looked? And he looked at her, and then he pointed at his mouth and his stomach, and he started pointing at her apple pie. And so she smiled, and she said, you must be very hungry. So she gave him the apple pie, and he gobbled it up as fast as he could, and he left. And he was so scared. She ran as fast as her little feet could carry her. She went running home, and she said, and she banged the door, and she closed it, locked it, and she said, Mom, Mom. Mom said, what happened? You're looking so scared. Did you see a bear? She said, no, this is worse than a bear. I saw a red Indian. He's on a warpath. He had this war paint painted on him, and he had this tomahawk on his hand. I am so scared. And she said, Daddy's not here. What are we going to do now? So mommy said, this doesn't sound right. So she quickly took all her furniture and she pushed it against, she asked Annie to help her, and she pushed it against the doors. They locked the doors, and you can see Annie sitting on her mommy's lap. And she said, I'm so scared. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And mommy said, let's pray. So they prayed. And then they waited. And they waited. And they were hoping Daddy would come by that evening. But Daddy didn't come at all. And soon there was this big bang on the door again. Just like the big bang she heard on her house. And so mommy said, oh my goodness, they're here, they're here. And they were scared. They did not know what to do. And so then she looked at her daughter, and then her daughter said, let me just peek and see who is it. And she looked, and she said, Mom, it's the same man that came to my little playhouse. So she said, do you have any more apple pies? And mommy said, yes, I think I have a couple more. So she ran to the kitchen, and she got an apple pie, and she signaled to this red Indian man, and she opened the window just a little bit where she could pass out the pie to him. And she gave the pie to him, and he was so happy. He ate it up, and he left. He called all the people to leave the place, and he left. And Mommy and Annie were so scared. And then they slept well that night. Nothing happened. But they found it several days later that their neighbors' houses were burnt down. Their neighbors were killed. You can see how they put fire on their houses. They were killed by these red Indians. And then they heard that this man, this red Indian man who had all this war paint on his face, and a man that they gave the apple pie to, he had gone and he told everybody, this house, the people are very nice. They're very kind. So don't touch this home. All because of a little girl who gave this man apple pies and who smiled at him even though it was so frightening to do it. But who do you think helped that happen? Who put it in the heart of this girl to give the apple pie? Jesus, right? So when we are in trouble, when our daddies are not around us, when our mommies are not around us, if we are in trouble, just pray out to God and say, God, help me. And God will help us out in our worst fears. He will help us to get out of them, and He will deliver us. You can go back to your